I'm Chris King. My company is Transformative CFO. I partner with CFOs in their finance transformation. And I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves and give a little bit of the context from which they're approaching this question that you've come to us for, which is how do I create an efficient FP&A function?
Perry Loud, I'm the head of central finance at Everbridge. Yeah.
That is snappy, all right.
Keep it snappy.
Wing Chan with Business Solution Partners. So we're a sponsor of this event. Also, we're partners with Oracle NetSuite and Workday Adaptive Insights. So I've been working with ERP and BI solutions 15 plus years. So a lot of my background, my responses will be kind of the visibility I've seen working with our clients. Over a couple hundred clients, ranging from 50 million to 5 billion in revenues.
And I'm Gina Spain. I'm the Director of Financial Reporting for Virgin Galactic. Where I'm coming from, I guess I'll start, if you haven't heard of Virgin Galactic. We are, I guess you could say, the Starbucks of commercial space travel, because we are trying to make sure it's all about the experience. It's not just the flight. When you go up into space, there's a whole week-long experience along with that. We're building an astronaut campus so they can enjoy that and really prolong the experience for them. But most people that go up, when they come down, it changes their whole perspective on life and where they are in the world. So it's really life-changing event for them. So we try to make it as special as possible. But where I'm coming from answering these questions is we've really ramped up in the last year as we are preparing for our commercial flights. We've gone our FP&A team from 4 people to about 40 in the last year. So there's been a lot of change in the organization.
What's your employee discount?
All right. It won't matter. Still can't afford it. All right, so we have a couple practitioners and Wing coming from more of a technology perspective. When we were thinking about how do you break down the task of creating an efficient FP&A function, I like to break things down. This came up a lot yesterday. We heard these kind of recurring themes: people, process, technology, data, information. So I wanted to get a little poll of both the audience and the panel of which of those 5 things do you think is kind of most important, most impactful? Where would you start if you had to start in a single place trying to make a team more efficient? How many people think it would be people? Yeah, that's a pretty good showing. I was expecting that. Process? I'm a big process guy myself. I kind of like that one. Technology? Anybody start with technology? Oh, good. I love to see that. Technology is an excellent thing to bring in, not a great place to start, in my opinion. Data? Is data important to efficiency? Yeah, would you start there? Probably not. Looks like a lot of people start with people, so we're going to start with people. My last one was information, KPIs, metrics, dashboards. Again, I think great tools, not a great place to start. So we had pretty good showing there on people. So we will start with people as well. So here's my question for the panel. When building an efficient FP&A team, what's most important with respect to people? Is it hiring the right people, developing the team skills, fostering teamwork, change management, or people management, or something else? Who wants to go first?
I can start, because hiring the right people has been key for us as we've really ramped up and added a large number of individuals to our team. And the first thing that we needed to look for is, what do we need? What we have to know first and foremost, what do we really need? Where are there gaps in the organization? We've talked about data ninjas. We may have some data ninjas on the team, but we need more communicators or collaborators to work with the business partners. So where are there gaps in the skill set of the employees that I have, and where can I go find that to help bridge those gaps on there? And then whenever I'm looking to bring people in or interviewing them, I'm looking for that curiosity. I think we kind of touched on it yesterday, that passion, right? Like, you look for someone that has passion. I also look for that curiosity. Like, with us, we're more of a startup, so we don't have processes and policies and dashboards and everything in place. You want it, you got to go make it. You got to start from scratch, and you got to be able to make that for it. So having that curiosity and wanting to understand and create order in the disorder, right, is key. And then the last thing I would say is that really look for someone that can that they've got enough experience that they can lean back and they know what good looks like. So for us, since we don't have that structure in place right now, they can lean on their experience to be able to identify and put in place what good looks like.
Yeah, I would say the caveat on what Gina was saying. First, you have to know what you want or what you need, whether you have internal resources to help guide you or whether you lean on an external resource, mentor, someone, consultant, et cetera, to kind of guide you to here's what you should be doing, here's what you should be monitoring, here's best practices for your industry. And then I think also people in the sense of just having a board or a management team or someone that's going to hold everyone accountable, because you could have the best people, the best ideas, best technology, best everything. But if no one's holding anyone accountable, it just kind of it gets lost by the wayside, and then it's like, what's the next new shiny object that everyone's going to focus on, this next month?
So more from a leadership perspective, you're thinking is where you would start people-wise, making sure they've got some accountability and some direction.
I think that's the carry through. First you have to execute, and then you have to carry through. So making sure that all the stakeholders are being asked what their numbers are. How are you doing budget versus actual, every week, every month? If you
How's
create
that driving our efficiency of FP&A?
I think it helps drive user adoption and process improvement, because if people aren't held accountable, nobody's talking about it, who cares if you have a budget, right?
So you're talking about accountability of the departments that are
Correct.
correct. Yeah, we're using the numbers to show. Okay.
And certainly having technology or having ways where stakeholders can have bidirectional feedback so that they could easily pull the data when they want, so they're getting value out of the whole process, as well as and not just giving numbers. They're oftentimes stakeholders are asked to give up their budget numbers. They give it, but they never get information back, so they don't know how they're doing month to date, quarter to date, year to date. And so it's harder to stay on plan if you don't have that visibility. And it's hard to be committed to your own numbers if you don't know how you're doing.
Okay, Perry, so people, hiring, teamwork, development, what leads to efficiency most for you?
I think I certainly start from a place of fostering team development and team cohesiveness. I mean, even to the point that Gina brings up about hiring the right people, you're never starting from zero, right? If you're hiring, you're already one in the situation. You have to hire people that are going to fill the skill gaps and really be able to cohesively fit within how the team is intended to operate. I think that's a really important piece. I tend to focus on a couple of key soft skills that are kind of universal, things like creative problem solving, an intellectual curiosity, like a desire to actually improve and to be efficient. I think that's in building an efficient FP&A team, you have to actually look at that as a desire to be efficient from an individual perspective. I find that after that creating an environment where you're encouraging people to lean on their own diverse experiences brings a lot of new perspective to problems that we're ultimately trying to solve. If you have everybody from the same background, there's a higher probability that their answers are all going to be the same. And it creates that, it can really create a block in the cohesiveness of a team.
Yeah, great. Anybody have a different view on kind of the most important part of people? You heard some teamwork and hiring. Anybody a big fan of starting somewhere else? Caitlin. The mic is coming. Oh. Let's go Caitlin and then Jason. All right, either way.
You kind of hit this on the cohesiveness, but I'm a big fan of establishing mentors all throughout the team. So each level has a mentor. That's in short, yeah, and I feel like it's underutilized often.
Yeah.
You want to go next?
Thank you. I was gonna say, just start shopping around, finding people's pain points. We started making a list of just all the things that people were doing that they were like, oh God, this sucks. Like we had one guy in the accounting team that spent like 3 hours every day posting cash transactions. It's like, okay, that's not
Right.
not efficient. We need to figure something out. So and that also like raises morale as well, because you're showing like, no, that's not okay. Like, we need to fix that.
Yeah. So that's getting into that sort of people management a bit, right? And really engaging with them on what are you doing and how do you do what you do? And a lot of times the person doing stuff maybe isn't in a position to say, I don't think we should be doing this at all, right? And as a leader, you can kind of bring in that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, piggybacking off what Perry was saying, one of the things when you're first hiring a team is you're going to have a natural bias to hire mini versions of yourself.
Mhm.
Okay, that's just like a natural human behavior that you're going to have, and I've found that has worked on sometimes, and more from I want someone that's as passionate as I am, someone that's as detail oriented as I am, someone that's a strategic thinker, those sorts of things. But don't box yourself in to hire many versions of yourself, because what you will end up doing is you'll have blinders on to what your own deficiencies are, and the best team is you have to hire people that are smarter than you in the other places that it actually enhance the team.
Yeah, and that goes to what Perry was saying a little bit about, you have certain soft skills that you kind of want everybody on the team to have, right? And that curiosity. And then when you get into the real like harder skills, capabilities, you're trying to fill out a team and make sure you've got people that are bringing different perspectives and different tools to solve problems collaboratively. Mike?
Just one comment on something Gina said earlier about, make sure you hire the right person. And, and I think it depends on what you're hiring for, right? Like, if you're hiring like, to lead the FP&A team, right? Like, the leader of that team is left and you're looking to replace that hire, to replace that departure, as opposed to filling in a staff position here, right? It's a completely different skill set, right, that you're looking for. And, one's more of, you need somebody to jump right in, right out of the box, very experienced senior. The other one can kind of be developed a little bit. Certainly you want attributes like a curious mind, maybe you do want an Excel jockey, but I think your point was dead on about really understanding what you need in order to go get the right person from the initial part of the hiring process.
Yeah. One of the things I think you find when you're trying to transform a team, for lack of a better word, sorry, it's the one that comes to mind for me a lot, to be an efficient FP&A team, you're trying to change the efficiency level that's in your organization. You got to get into that change management, right, and really how do I get people on board with it? I don't want people to think I'm driving efficiency because I'm looking to, cut 1 out of 5 people, right? We're going to get 20% more efficient and have 20% less people. You really got to get people on board and safe with the idea of let's speed up what we're doing and we'll add more value. Anybody have any change management experience in this area? Tips, tricks to share?
Not on change management, but I was just, because it's kind of fun that the theme of the conference, I think, has kind of gone on very focused on people, which is somewhat different than a lot of times that is more focused on technology. So just going back to your point on the people is, again, open to the group. And part of the challenge that we have in hiring in FP&A is, HR has no idea what we do. They have no idea what the talent we want. They want to be able to put some kind of letters that are required. So I don't know how many people, require, or their company requires a CPA to do FP&A. I don't think that's a requirement at all. And you think about how dramatically you're changing your pool, right? You're going to have to push, because HR is going to ask for something. It's like, well, we want a credential, right? Pick a credential out. There's one for FP&A, but it's, relatively young. And you're going to have to fight HR. I don't know if, again, putting this experience, out is great. To Gina's point, great FP&A people are curious people. That's all. Like, HR doesn't want to hear that, right? And say, I'm looking for, find me curious people, right? And so you're going to have to fight to get good talent. First of all, the demand for FP&A talent good FP&A talent far outstrips the supply, because you're just asking for a skill set that's not easy to find. And then, you're going to, it's kind of that, oftentimes whether you want to call it a unicorn or a purple squirrel, is to say, I want to, find this great talent and I want to pay them less than the going market rate, and they're really hard to find, and they're probably really, really happy where they are.
Right.
And so what they turn around and say, I've had an open position for 18 months. And go, okay, you have an open position because there's a problem, right? You're not compensating them. You're not broadening out who you're looking for. I know a lot of folks are kind of more in that startup phase, but if you're a little more established, is just look broader throughout your organization. Find those people that are curious. Some of the best people I've ever hired are the people that are interested, that don't work for me, but are interested in what I do. Like they come in after hours. Early in my career, I worked on a trading desk. And the people that I always wanted to hire were the back office people that wanted to spend time understanding what the front office does, right? Because they have the curiosity there, they have the motivation. And so, when you think about, you just, FP&A to me, and again, open question, reserve the right to be smarter tomorrow than today, but it has a very broad group of folks you can have, whether they come from the ops side, they come from the accounting side, finance side, data science side. These are all pieces that can really help your team out. So the idea that there's a kind of, again, and I'm highly biased that FP&A is the greatest thing on the earth, but there's really not this cookie cutter saying this is the exact skill set I want for every position I'm going to have in FP&A.
So Brian, let me close out the people section by kind of leveraging that a bit and saying it's probably a lot easier to create an FP&A team that has all the skills you need than to go hire an FP&A person that has all the skills the whole team needs, right? And if you start appreciating those differences and finding those different pieces that you need. I had worked with one guy that would just periodically, every 6 or 12 months or something, he'd kind of just take down his kind of org chart and just build a new fantasy org chart and sort of say, what are really the roles and the skills that I need in this organization? And then he'd go back to the people and kind of place them back on there and see how he needed to develop it. Caitlin helped bring us to the sort of the next question a bit with process, right? Because part of managing the people is what do the people do and how are they doing it and how do you bring about some process improvement. So let's see what you guys think. What have you done to foster process improvement on your teams as a way to drive efficiency?
I can jump on that right away. I mean, process is a hugely important piece. Clearly defining it, ensuring that there is accountability and that all the stakeholders, to your point, understand the outputs that they're going to be receiving so that there's no loss of expectation from that perspective. I think I really approach this problem by fostering ownership of various processes, like ensuring that there is specialization to a point that individuals on the team can own a piece of the process and have some kind of creative control over it while simultaneously encouraging cross-training in the sense of a handoff within that process. Somebody owns the initial piece of it. Like you take, for example, a quote-to-cash process. Have somebody own all of the bookings reporting, for example, a bookings close and reporting process, and how that hands off into the revenue aspect. Having two different individuals own those two different pieces creates a lot of collaboration within the team. It not only fosters that intellectual curiosity that I was talking about, gives people the opportunity to develop, gets them more engaged, and ultimately lowers your business continuity risk in the event that someone does leave.
Yeah, I notice just organizations that hold their teams accountable, particularly the ones involved in the budget process, tends to have better company culture, acceptance of process changes, and process improvement.
Gina?
And for me, I think process is key. It's also a means to the end. The end being you want good data, you want it accurate, and you want it timely, right? So what can we do to streamline these processes to make sure that that data is not only accurate, but you're getting it faster and in a manner that makes sense for everyone. So yeah, I think you touched on it with the collaboration. That's key. Making sure that the accounting and the finance teams are working together, because you don't want the accounting team working on some kind of change or knowledge, know about some kind of change that they're putting in place, and that's not communicated to the finance. Oh, we need to make this modification to our structure to help facilitate the change that they're making within their system. So yeah, collaboration, and then making sure that the process is giving you the means to the end, right?
As Brian pointed out, we've been very focused on people in this whole conference, which I think is great from a priority perspective. I also mentioned I'm a big process guy. I like the idea of leading with the process and digging in there. If I were to come in to make a team more efficient, I think before I started hiring more people or assuming what skills needed to be developed, I'd get into the actual processes of doing the work, identify where the problems are, where the pain points are. Are we suffering from not having enough data literacy or not having enough Excel or data visualization skills, right? You find where are the things that are really kind of causing inefficiency, and then with that sort of diagnosis that can come from process, your prescriptions might then be that I need to add this person to the team, or I need to develop these skills, or I need to foster teamwork and collaboration. So I am probably the outlier saying I'd lead with process, but curious to see what you guys have kind of done in terms of gaining efficiency through tackling processes. Anybody have lean finance in their organization, or have you? And have you done any Kaizen events or process improvement workshops or anything? Anyone? Takers? Mike?
No workshops per se here, but just a couple of examples of, and most of us have probably seen this, examples where we had kind of a flawed process, and you're right, is that drilling into the process, is what really needs to occur. I think I think we had a speaker yesterday that said when he got to his organization the first 90 days, right, it was a 3.5 week close, right, which means that they're constantly closing.
Right.
And I had a version of that at one of my companies I worked at, right? It was not 3.5 weeks, so we actually had a week and a half off, but it was 2.5 weeks where they closed, right? And so, and in my opinion, the close is absolutely critical, necessary, but doesn't add value when it's dragged out, right? It's like taxes, if you need to get them done, but taking longer to do them isn't really going to help you at all. It's simply going to bog down the system. And so it just took a lot. And so in my opinion, it's almost a case study of attacking a process, iterative process, one thing at a time here. What's the data we need? Where's the holdup? And you go back and you'll see that because you're relying on so many different groups for information here, that there's breakdowns outside of your control that you have to deal with, and in the end, right, you keep tackling these at an iterative process. We ended up with our close down to 5 days, from 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, I think process improvement is a great area to tackle speeding up the month-end close. And I think on the FP&A cycles, I'm going to talk about later today, you get these kind of events that recur, and it's a good way to go after that. Perry, you want to add something?
Yeah, I would certainly like to. I think going off of your point, Mike, and Gina, also what you brought up around the pain points is doing a cohesive analysis of really where the pain issues are in a process is kind of a never-ending thing. Right? Even if the output is not really changing, looking at the internal side of it and recognizing pieces that, I'll just give an example. Let's say that you have a process to deliver a single table or set of metrics to the board. That single table or set of metrics might include 5 or 6 different key points. By assessing that and saying, well, out of these 5, 6 key points, maybe 4 of them we're able to accomplish in less than an hour, but that 5th, 6th one takes us 2.5 days, or has to be delayed because of other inputs coming from other teams that have its own set of time delays. Even just addressing it from that perspective and saying, let's focus on the efficiencies that we can improve. Let's push this maybe a couple of weeks. Maybe we don't need to include it. You can really improve the overall process, and to your point, you can alleviate a lot of that pain, going back to the people, that helps build morale and can really help people focus on things that might be more important. And by simply stripping out one of those key pieces, you may find that you have the opportunity to add 3 or 4 more that actually may tell a better story as part of that result.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I wanted to touch on too what you were talking about with the lean improvements and
what I found with driving lean in the organization is that you can use it as a development tool too, as we've gone through and tried to document our current state map. It's a great opportunity to bring, different people from different areas in and not only get them to work together and collaborate. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that this then goes over the wall to you, and then you do this, this, and this. They get a broader view of the whole picture, the bigger picture, which helps them be more strategic in the long run. So.
Yeah, and one of those lean concepts is called voice of the customer. But you look at the process, right, that has an output that goes to somebody, and you're encouraged to kind of go downstream and deal with that. And when I was doing process improvement workshops, I also found that the same was true sort of upstream, that people are just unaware of the consequence of bad data or whatever they were doing kind of downstream. And every once in a while, you got to go upstream and find that guy. You're sitting downstream, you keep pulling dead fish out of the stream, right? And eventually you go upstream and you say, hey, did you know you're killing the fish, right? Because they can't see what's happening later. And that, FP&A needs to be reaching out into the organization and understanding what's going on with the business and getting that upstream, downstream collaboration through process improvement, I think is a really good way to do it. So we've hired, we've developed our team a little bit. We've been working on our management. We've mapped out our processes. We know where our pain points are now. I think at that point, we're ready for some technology. So how important is technology in improving efficiency? And then what technologies have you guys introduced, and what impact did that have on your organizations? And I'll invite Wing in advance a little bit to talk about some client experiences as well and what you've seen as a service provider there. But
sure.
Rick, why don't we start with you?
There's a lot of great technology solutions out there, and what's right for each company varies. It's very subjective. But we're partners with Oracle NetSuite for ERP, and Oracle also has a EPM, CPM solution for FP&A functionality. And we're also partners with Workday Adaptive Insights. So we selected those two and mainly focus on those two just because of higher user adoption. Just with our client base, the user adoption has been really high. They're both very usable solutions. And even amongst the publishers that how much they invest in R&D into the solutions, we just noticed those organizations tend to be the ones that stand out. So that's the reasons why we focused on those.
Gina or Perry, what have you guys done with
so
ad tech to drive efficiency?
it's very important because you want to do more with less, right? They always want more and more and more. So we utilize Oracle. We also utilize Anaplan for our FP&A function, which has been a great tool for us. It's very flexible to meet our needs because we really have, in this organization, two totally different businesses. We have a manufacturing side where they are building the spaceship, and we have a commercial side where they're building the resort, for the astronauts. So two completely different industries and two different kinds of modeling that we have to do, as we ramp up through there. So it's been a great tool for us. I will say, though, the one hitch that it's only as good as the integration and the mapping inside of it, right? So I've had this problem, not to say I haven't now, but we've had it in the past where if you don't have a very strong integration process in the beginning and have that mapping tied in, you're not going to get the things that you want in the end. So that was critical for us.
I certainly agree with that last point that you made, because and something that was actually said a lot yesterday was the technology. You need to identify the problem that you're trying to solve before you necessarily attack it from a solution perspective. You may find, and I've seen this many times at startups that I've been at, is the mentality is, we need an FP&A planning tool. We need this. And my response is often, we don't yet have a planning process. Like how are we going to just apply a blanket solution when we're not quite sure how we're going to build a model, right? We're 70 people. We don't necessarily need this to track headcount or to plan for benefits. That's easy to do when you have a small organization. So I think the technology really following the problem that you're ultimately trying to solve for is a really key piece, and not to look at it the other way. It's very easy to take a broad paintbrush when it comes to FP&A solutions that will hit on all the topics and create kind of a problem downstream if you don't have those integrations set up. You end up ultimately having to kind of pull the wires back out and reconnect everything when there's a big change to the organization.
Yeah, I see companies that often spend a lot of time on system selection, and they're comparing one software solution to its competitors. And I always say that the capability of a solution compared to its competitor is far more similar than the experience that whichever solution it is, if you look at all the customers using that solution, the difference between the capability they're getting out of the solution at the top decile of customers, getting a lot of value out of it, to the lowest, that's where the big variation comes from. And it comes from the way you put it in, the integrations, the training, the way you're using it. So if you make it a habit to always try to maximize your use of existing technology before you replace like for like, you'll typically find that it's not the capabilities of the system that are frustrating you. It's the way you're using it, or the way you've put it in, or the adoption, what went behind it. So yeah, I really like focusing on that first.
That's a great point, because we notice most clients will just look to technology and automate what they're doing already in Excel.
Mm-hmm. Right, or whatever they're used to.
I want this just like my Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So you're recreating the same problems you had.
And then if they're frustrated with their, say, adaptive utilization, right, and they see a great demo from your competitor, they think, well, that's what we need. Adaptive won't do it for us. Well, it's doing it for other people. It's not doing it for you. So,
I'll
any-
say
yeah, go ahead.
another thing. Another tool that we have really expanded the usage of is Power BI. I don't know if a lot of people use that. It can connect directly with Oracle, so it can update on a regular basis, and that gives us real-time information. And so making sure that we have the structure and are providing those tools for everyone as far as the visibility and the information, that's been a huge plus for us as well.
Yeah, and there's a technology that often kind of exists already in the organization, right? It's often underutilized. You might need to buy licenses to Power BI Pro to build dashboards, but you don't need them if you're already using Teams. For example, you can have dashboards right in Teams that everybody on the team can see that are plugged in, and you're just underutilizing what you're already sort of paying for if you don't have any of that going on. The other technology I see just uniformly underutilized is actually Excel. I know we all kind of think we use Excel too much, but if you go through any finance organization and look at all the people using Excel, and then you get into the process, you start doing these process improvement worksheets, show me your spreadsheet, show me how you're using it, you will find that everybody in your organization is using Excel. Everybody would be more efficient if they knew how to use it better, and there's virtually no barriers to them learning except fostering this desire to go out and teach yourself some things, right? There's YouTube videos, you can Google whatever question you have and whatever it is you're trying to do. If you have those soft skills we were talking about curiosity, I bet you there's a better way to do this in Excel. If you get your team just with the habit of asking that question and then going to solve it for themselves, they'll learn. Or you do some lunch and learns, take the people that are best at it and just teach that next piece of it and really get into the power of some of those things. And I've just used that as an example of there's always this clamor, let's put in a new system, that'll solve all our problems. And it's rarely ever true. It will often exacerbate problems that you haven't solved that needed to be solved some other way. But certainly adoption and training and upskilling on systems is a critical part. But to get to that, you have to fundamentally build the habit of everybody's always trying to learn.
I think it's a really interesting point that you bring up about the Excel component. I can't even tell you how many times, it probably happens monthly, that I'll be collaboratively working on a spreadsheet with individuals in my own team or another team, and I come across something that I literally didn't know. Like,
I find anytime you look over somebody's shoulder who's doing something in Excel, you figure out something new.
oh, I didn't know that
Different way of doing
shortcut.
it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I assume everybody here uses Excel to some extent. How many of you use Power Query in Excel? Good. That's a good handful. If you weren't one of those people, just put up your hands. That is just incredible raw power in Excel that's sitting right there for free. You're a few YouTube videos away from learning how to use that. And the bonus on that is Power Query in Excel and Power Query and Power BI are exactly the same. So you're learning how to transform data either way. And if you want to gain efficiency in FP&A, there's probably no better tool than learning how to do that, because now you're hitting the refresh button instead of building a spreadsheet or changing something else. So if that's not already on your list of things I'm going to learn next week, that's probably my number one tip for efficiency here. All right, so that brings us to data. I think we've all experienced that wrestling with bad data or poorly structured data creates a lot of inefficiencies. And figuring out how to conquer that is difficult. A lot of times people say, well, we don't really own the data, or in FP&A, oftentimes at least you're downstream from accounting in terms of the data, so you get into collaboration. But wrestling with bad data, losing trust in your data, having to prove out data, having to fix stuff before you can produce a report instead of loading data and slicing and dicing it, all that stuff leads to some inefficiencies. So what have you guys found are kind of the best ways to drive efficiency through improving your data?
I'm happy to speak to that.
Yeah.
Capitalizing on the Excel topic, I often find that, and I like what you said, that it's not necessarily just bad data, it's bad data structure. Right? Data is data. It's not necessarily bad or good. It's a number. You might have inconsistencies. You might have a lack of proper control at the source, right? The whole garbage in, garbage out mentality. But the data is what it is. And if you kind of try to refocus the conversation away from, well, this is all bad, to let's actually talk about what it is, right? Let's define what this is. Let's focus on what we can take out of it. You can kind of change the mindset to say, we know there's deficiencies in this data, but if we can get 80% of what we need out of it, then we can focus on improving that 20% upstream, like you said, getting better controls at the source, ensuring that there's cleaner definitions, perhaps. I mean, I don't know how many people use Salesforce. I always find that there's always way too many fields that are redundant, and half the team is looking at one, other one's looking at the other. They assume they're the same thing because it might say, booking value 1 and 2, and it's like, what?
So how do you deal with that? How do you address that problem to gain efficiency?
Well, this is where the Excel comes in. I often find that in my own experience, some of the best thing is really just shining a light on the issues. This can also be really achieved well through a Power BI that's integrated with a system that it may not solve the issues you're looking to immediately of, I want a consistent, accurate report, but it may improve the process and the efficiency by showing everyone where the issues are, right? I used to call it the Wikipedia treatment, and back in my old days of pulling data out of a system that everyone thought was a problem. Oh, Salesforce is wrong, this is wrong, that's wrong, HubSpot. Pulling it out, throwing it in an Excel spreadsheet, showing where the similarities are, and sending it out to the organization and saying, this is what the system currently is reflecting, right? Half the time people will come back and say, hey, wait a minute, this deal shouldn't really be worth $2 billion, that should be in yen. And it's like, right. Now go back and fix it in the system.
And I'd say Power BI is even better than Excel at shining that light, but I love the idea, like a great takeaway is shine a light on the data and it will improve. It won't do it all on its own. It's not the only thing you have to do, but just raise the visibility of those mismatches, right? And then maybe create awareness around the stewardship of that data. But it's starting out by just exposing it and democratizing it. Data should not be an asset closed up in a vault by IT, right? The more you shine a light on it, the more people start to become aware of how they impacted it in the first place.
Well, during system changes, that's certainly a good time to rethink what data you really want and need. usually at the start of an ERP project, or even before that during requirements gathering, we'll kind of delve into what type of reporting and information and analysis do you want out of the system, so that you can kind of back into what information needs to be tracked in the new system so that you can get what you want. I'll add something to that. He's looking for the mic.
Hit my steps.
I've seen firsthand, and I think all of us have, when we either get the wrong system or get the right system that's implemented incorrectly, which is effectively the wrong system anyway. And so I've seen some real cases where it's cost companies really big, and I think I think there needs to be like a kind of an iterative process to identify, kind of a 3-step process to identify kind of your needs analysis with regard to a system when you're looking to kind of replace something. And the low-hanging fruit is, well, kind of, let's for sure replace what we have today. We know we need this, right? And at a minimum, you should get that, right, to replace it, and then you need to kind of consider, and this is where it gets challenging here, is stepping back and figuring out, what can I possibly need in the future? Kind of predicting your needs, right? And if you look back 10 years and look, and see what your financial reports look like 10 years ago versus what they look like today, that'll kind of identify what you needed 10 years ago to be ready for today with the system that you don't really have, which is why you need a new system. And that's really challenging, right, to kind of project forward and think about these future needs that you're going to, information that you're going to need and functionality you're going to need before you need it, right? And I think that's where a lot of companies forget. They look for a pure replacement for the current system today, and they don't really think about anything beyond that. I have a problem, I'm not getting this sort of information here, and if you get that, great, it does help, but it doesn't embed the flexibility that you need going forward here, right? So there needs to be this concerted effort about what you may need in the future here in order to ascertain that. And maybe the question is, looking at these systems here, you ask the question, what are its future capabilities? How are some of the strongest users using these technologies? What can be done, right? And and that's, I think, is where a lot of companies really fail, right? Because you're spending a lot of money, time, and effort on this implementation here, and if you don't get what you need, you're going to find yourself a year later having additional needs that ideally should have been considered in the first place.
Hey, and ultimately, we kind of have this stack. You get this external factor, these things acting on you, these kind of demands and expectations that come out of the organization. Now I need to use my people, my processes, my technology, my data, right, to deliver on those demands and expectations in an efficient way. And so how well I've chosen, I need to really understand what those things are going to be and why, and dig into what's really most important in the business, what's most important to change, to kind of get ahead of how am I going to make sure I'm maintaining this stack to deliver on those kind of demands and expectations. We're going to switch to information, metrics, KPIs in a second. Any last thought on cleaning up data?
I have one thing I'd say. Nothing creates more inefficiencies in an organization if they don't trust the data. I've seen that time again. Why are you going back and reconciling this out when you're pulling it straight from, well, I don't trust that it's giving me this information. Mm-hmm. So it just
lack of trust in data is a huge inefficiency.
Lack of trust is a huge issue in creating inefficiencies. So making sure that people understand the I say the Oz behind the curtain, how the data is being pulled and how that mapping is, I think is key for them to get that confidence. And then having that business partnering where you're helping answer the questions and building that connection and that trust with them will help, increase the efficiencies as well. And then one other point that you had said, you get what you measure, right? where you were talking about the data and on there. I've always tried to use team improvement boards within different areas of the organization just to help create the visibility, and you get what you measure. So you want to improve on this, start measuring, add that visibility out there. People will start asking questions. They'll start, talking to each other about it, and inherently it will improve.
Yeah. We often think about like who owns the data that's in Oracle, right? Who owns it? Who's responsible for whether or not it's good or not, right? And it's a false question in the first place. The question is who owns the data that's going into Oracle? And that varies, right? The employee master data should be owned by HR, right? And somebody's setting up a new employee. That's the only time that somebody should be making sure that that employee data is correct, or when there's a change, right? And then customer master data might be, the order entry team, right? And somebody's setting up new customers. They own the quality of that data. And if you just create this awareness of data stewardship and the value of data as an asset, and how quickly the value of that asset gets diminished by mixing it with just a little bit of bad data, right?
Yes.
If I could tell you who was going to win the next 10 horse races, right, I'd have really good, valuable data that you could make a ton of money on, right? But if 20% of that data was wrong, the amount of money you could make on that data would be far less, right? Because you couldn't bet it all each time, right? You couldn't keep doubling, quadrupling your money or whatever. And just creating that awareness of like how rapidly the value of data can erode by some bad data, creating a sense of stewardship, and then putting that flashlight on it and saying, here's where we've got some bad data, and getting at kind of the root cause of that stuff can really, I think, drive a lot of efficiency. Let's move to our last. Our last point is about information, KPIs, OKRs if you like, but metrics, BI tools. I kind of put all that in the category of information. We've bled into this a little bit already, and Mike was talking about the information that you're going to want next, and thinking through that, which almost kind of falls into this area. But Ginny, you touched on it already, but you're welcome to dive back in terms of metrics and KPIs and stuff, and how that can be used to drive efficiency in the FP&A.
Yeah, I think that is a key area. You want to make sure that you have the right, KPIs that you're measuring. If you're creating dashboards, you want to give people those one-page visuals. Here's the key things to get us to the goals that we want to achieve for this year, for 5 years, for whatever the target is. So making sure that you clearly identify them and everyone understands how achieving those are going to get you to the goals that you have set for the organization is key.
Yeah, my feeling is if you're not using it, definitely look to incorporate that into your FP&A processes, because it allows you to have proactive alerts, so you're kind of being warned and informed as soon as trends are breaking, as opposed to in damage control all the time and dealing with putting out fires. And then if I think for certain industries, there are third parties that offer standards of KPIs, so you kind of measure how you're doing versus the industry standard. For software, I know there is.
Oh, certainly. I think when it comes to information, I know that myself personally, I tend to, I find it far more valuable to have a few key metrics that you can rely on consistently, as opposed to a plethora that you're unsure about. And it goes to a kind of a building mentality of, if we can all agree, everyone has the same definition, everyone has the same understanding of what this is telling us, then it can just start to open up the details underneath. In addition to that, and it kind of goes back to the process and the data component of this, is being able to have aligned segmentation across data and connectivity across the data, right? If you have a set of customers and you say, our customer count is 1,000 and our revenue is 2 million, but you're looking at completely different segments of the business, you can't use those to actually tell a story. You need to have that alignment and at a digestible level for the business, because if you pull out 1,000 customers, it's not going to tell a story. You're just looking at a massive list. It doesn't actually tell you anything. Being able to put them into groups, cohorts, is really key. And I know that, this is more on the data side, but it's really key to being able to tell the story and to get at that information.
There's a whole other aspect to improving FP&A efficiency that relates to the information piece, which is actually removing it, right? We tend to keep adding reports year after year, decade after decade, right? So ultimately, what happens is what becomes most important, you get a new report for them. What just became least important, stays, right? It's still there, and it's difficult to really get at whether or not anybody's really deriving value out of the work that we're doing. So, anybody have any tips for getting rid of reports?
That's a good point, because less is more. And I don't remember who said it yesterday, but they said, it's key to be concise, because the people in HR, the people in sales, they don't want all of the supporting information. They just want to know the answer and have it very specific and concise. That's a very good point.
Anybody else?
I totally agree. I mean, I've used Salesforce. We use HubSpot internally for content marketing, and there's just so much extra data that just gets in the way of being able to do your job effectively. Yeah. And most organizations, I notice, don't have a process for data purging or cleanup.
Right. Yeah, and there's data cleanup, and there's also just like the number of reports, right? And if it's automated, okay, then there's only so much like headache that goes to the administration of it, right? But if somebody on your team actually has a process to create the report, I think it's important to know how somebody else is using it.
I think asking those questions, like, get the listing of who the distribution is for these reports. What are you using this for? Oh, I don't look at that anymore. Okay, that one's done. We're not doing it. And kind of identifying it that way.
I found oftentimes if you say, hey, I send you this report every month. Do you still use it? Like, oh yeah, I use it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you still want it? Yeah, definitely. I want it, right? And if you then change your question a little bit to, can you show me how you use it? It's like, well, you see this number on page 5. I go to page 5 when I get the report. I pick up this number and I put it in my slide that I give to the board every quarter. It's like, wow, I could get you that number with a lot less work from my team. There's a great Harvard Business Review article written a long time ago by a guy named Clayton Christensen. He's a professor there. And it was called The Job to Be Done. And he talks about hire a milkshake, I think is kind of his thing. But he's hired by McDonald's to figure out how to increase milkshake sales. So he goes to McDonald's and he watches people ordering it. And then he asks them the question when they walk away. When you hire that milkshake, what job are you hiring it to do? And after getting over the oddness of that question, people would say, well, I got a long commute. I want something that's going to kind of last the whole time, right? I'm going to eat in the car. I don't want crumbs all down me. I tried, a muffin, and they go through all these things. But I love taking that idea and kind of saying, when you hire my report that I give you every month, what job are you asking it to do? And really kind of get into that. The other question I'd really get in the habit of asking when somebody asks for a new report or something, or some data in response to something, is just help me understand what you're trying to achieve. And you kind of get into like, why is this important? Why is it important right now? Is it going to be important next month, right? A lot of ad hoc things that come in actually are just new recurring needs. And other stuff actually was already available. But some people will come in and start dictating a report that they'd like to see just because they're trying to answer a single question. Anybody else have any tricks for eliminating stuff? Caitlin? Mike is coming.
Thank you. Yeah, I think moving people to a self-service, like dashboards and things, is huge, especially,
yes.
I'm thinking like on the OpEx side, for instance, like get them a dashboard, it can be filtered on their department. They can delve into the GL, they can look at the vendor, like whatever they want, they can, democratizing that data is huge, because I think
Absolutely.
Our job is to add insights. If people are just coming to us and saying, what was my number last month? It's like,
right.
You can make that a
I
self-service.
love that. Let them self-serve it. Then they'll come to you with a question probably. It'll be a much better question that's really worth your team's time. The other thing that I love about that is they start seeing the structure of the data. So they start realizing, I can take this data and I can slice it by customer or by product or by region or by whatever. Those are the ways it slices. But if they ask for a report and you're going to go build it in Excel, they could say, could I see all the sales of this product and this customer in this region on one line? And then I'd like all the sales from this other region on this line, except for the ones that were already included. You can create some really complicated reports in Excel, but when you get into like a dashboard that they're self-serving, they really understand the data that's there. If we're fundamentally missing a way to slice our transaction data, then that's a bigger problem we ought to go solve with some method other than FP&A digging through the GL detail to parse out content. Let's go to Mike.
Quick thought on the on eliminating reports, and this is admittedly sneaky, but I probably about 20 years ago plus, I worked at the Pacific Life Insurance Company in Enterprise Risk Management Group, and my role wasn't accounting or finance related, it was compliance related, right? We took a $38 billion portfolio, ran it through all these interest rate scenarios, duration, convexity, generating a great and beautiful monthly 38-page report of a bunch of technical information here that Pacific Life used to give to anybody asking about analytics and risk management, and I did a lot of work on that. And we distributed it probably to about 150 people at Pacific Life, most of the senior people, because it was our entire investment portfolio. And there was a handful of reports in there that caused a lot of time for me that I wasn't sure anybody used. And I asked the question a couple times to the distribution, does everybody need the report on page 27? Inevitably, the answer was, absolutely we do, Mike. We use that constantly. We always need that report. And I'd try another report. Does everybody need the report on page 38? Yes, we do. Absolutely need that report. I wasn't buying it, and I strategically once or twice just forgot to put those reports in. Do you know how many people came back? Zero, right? So it's a way of really telling about what people really need and what they're really using, right?
Yeah, it's nice to have data just in case, but it's not free.
That's a good point. And I think, actually, if I may kind of capitalize on something, Caitlin, that you said, is there's a somewhat inherent resistance to what you're talking about in asking people to self-serve. There's a fear in, I have to learn this whole thing. Just, the age-old adage of if you teach a man to fish versus giving a man a fish, it's like, well, just give me a fish. I don't want to do the work to learn it. Yeah. And so there is a growing process in that. But what I've found through my experience is that once you get past those initial hurdles, it opens up the mindset of these people, and it really kind of changes, to what you said, it changes the conversation tremendously. Creates a lot better questions, creates a lot more of a dialogue than just an expectation, and it also opens up a big understanding in terms of the amount of work that goes into creating that in the first place. I just think it's important to note that when you try to adopt that kind of a mentality, you have to be aware of those resistances up front.
The other thing that those dashboards give you too is like you're starting with a data set, right? And now it's really what are the best visuals that will help somebody understand the data in this data set, and it's somewhat contained. And then if it's missing, you get the question of how can I make this dashboard tell me this? Like, well, that's a really good point, or help me understand what you're trying to achieve, right? Whichever way you want to get in, and now you're just tweaking your dashboard on top of that. I was talking to a couple people about Power BI, and they were saying our IT team owns it, or somebody else owns it. And Power BI is there to be a democratization of data and data visualization tool. And if it's being kept chained up in your organization, I would make that my first fight. Of really kind of opening that up, letting people play with it. You can lock down sensitive data for sure. But wanted to thank the panel today and your contributions, guys.
All right, thanks.
And the audience participation, as always, has been terrific. So thanks for having us up here and letting us talk with you.